Okay, speaking of Book of Boba Fett, though, the original cold take, and it is appropriate for Valentine's Day. It sort of is a hot take, but there was no fire. We all hope to see the Mother of Dragons in all her crimson glory, Qi'ra, show up in the Book of Boba Fett. I hesitate to say we all hope to see, but there was a lot of buzz around, again, what Charles Soule had set up, right? Of and not just Charles Soule, but the anticipation of Solo and everything coming out of that, and just the memories that we have of it. Hoping to see more of Kira's story. Um, Joel, I'll throw this to you. Why do you think there was a lot of buzz, a lot of talk about what you have called the Mephisto of the Book of Boba Fett?
Who's also Crimson, so
Yeah.
if you read the comics. I think a lot of it is probably because Qi'ra was getting a lot of buzz in the comics, and she was connected to Boba Fett, and the War of the Bounty Hunters was a Boba Fett-centric story, and Book of Boba Fett was this year, so it's sort of like, I don't know, it's sort of like you can connect the dots and maybe come out with a reasonable, hey, maybe Qi'ra is going to be important because this is a big tie-in thing, or possible tie-in thing, because like, oh, they're actually doing stuff with Qi'ra, it's been a while. So I can currently see that, and obviously then you get leakers who kind of say, "Oh, well, I'm hearing stuff," and then everyone gets excited over nothing. It's like it's the Mephisto thing all over again.
Yeah.
But I could totally see that, and also Boa's story is underworld centric, and I kind of hope Qi'ra's alive for this era still, regardless, because I think that's an interesting era to explore. But yeah, I think maybe people just kind of connect. I think this was more of a reasonable connecting of dots than the Mephisto thing. And just didn't pan out for whatever reason, or maybe it was never planned for.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, 2 points there. That in the comic, the Crimson Dawn or Crimson Reign crossover that we're currently in, there is, well, she does have an expiry date. We do know Crimson Dawn falls. We don't know if Qi'ra ends up dying for it. I believe, I can't quite remember, but yeah, there is this thing of after the fall and whatever ends up happening with Qi'ra. We know she's taking on Vader and Sidious, and we know how that ends. So it's true. We don't know if she's still alive in this period. We hope she is. Again, we don't know how much has been planned out. There is the Dom, you mentioned the Reddit threads and all that, all the Reddit leaks. I don't know, Dom, you want to go into that a little bit?
So it's interesting because the Qi'ra showing up in Book of Boba Fett was something that I think people were speculating for, people were hoping for, pretty much from the day it was announced. And honestly, some people were kind of hoping for it going back into, before we even knew Book of Boba Fett was a thing. People were more thinking it could be something for a future season of Mandalorian. And it touches on what you were talking about earlier, Matthew, which was people have a lot of good memories around Solo. It wasn't a big success in the way that Disney needed it to be to continue that story. And as a result, there are a lot of sort of dangling plot lines that are still just out there waiting for somebody to pick up on them. And I think the biggest one is Qi'ra. And again, people like Emilia Clarke. She was the big star on one of the biggest shows for a long time. So there's a real desire to get her back into Star Wars in some way. And so it felt like this was a possibility. And given the way Favreau and Filoni love to bring in characters from other shows or characters from other shows and from the books and the comics, it felt like something that could have happened. And so it was something people were hoping for, people were speculating about. And then someone went and posted on 4chan that they had a big leak of all the stuff that was going to happen in the Book of Boba Fett, and it would said that episode 1 would end with the big reveal of Qi'ra being in the show, and that Cad Bane would be her number 2, and all this stuff. And so they were clearly pulling from legitimate leaks that were out there, because they said things like Cad Bane would show up. He did. Said things like Black Chrysanthemum would show up. He did. The Pikes would be in there. They were. So they were pulling from some legitimate things, and then just adding some BS on top of that to get people talking. And I think that elevated the feeling of maybe Qi'ra could show up, because here's a leak, and then all these other sites pick up on it and they report on it and they bury the source within the article, and so that you think, oh well, this looks like a legitimate news source reporting on it, therefore it must be true, when in reality it's from a notorious forum that's where getting this source. So it was a bit of a disappointment in that regard, but it's just it that's how it went, and people ran with that for whatever reason. I honestly think you guys were pointing out the fact that she was back in the comics and how that could be setting something up or alluding to the fact that they had a plan for her in the show. My feeling is that that's kind of, it indicates the opposite. Yeah. And that when a character, especially one as high profile as Qi'ra, where again you have a very famous actor playing that role in live action, who could still very easily play that role in live action, and with a big plot line that's still just like out there that nobody knows how it's resolved. I think they generally would, given the choice, they would rather have Emilia Clarke come back than have Charles Soule write a comic book. And so the fact that they were letting that they gave Soule and Marvel and everybody the go ahead on first the War of the Bounty Hunter storyline and now the Crimson Reign storyline, to me that was a big old crimson flag that we shouldn't expect this. But like everybody else, I want Qi'ra to come back in live action. I was really hoping for it, and so I was still hoping, even though I suspected based on the fact that she was back in the comics, and that it wasn't just War of the Bounty Hunters, that they had a whole other arc planned for her. Suggested that probably they were the bad guy in Book of Boba Fett, the big bad, was going to be somebody else, and it was.